Good evening. My name is Mike Wood, and it's my pleasure to welcome all of you, especially Bruce Davidson, here to the Strand, the 84-year-old home of 18 miles of new, used, and rare books. We're here tonight to celebrate Aperture's recent reissuing of Davidson's 1986 classic, Subway, featuring 25 never-before-published photos. Bruce Davidson was born in Oak Park, Illinois in 1933 and began taking pictures as a child. By 1958, after a stint in the U.S. Army, Davidson had joined the storied Magnum Photos Agency, going on to produce a body of work as significant as any American photographer of the last 50 years. Works such as East 100th Street, Brooklyn Gang, and Subway offer lyrical documentations of life in New York City, though Davidson is by no means exclusively a New York photographer. Davidson is a master both of black and white and color photography. In addition, in his introduction to Subway, he writes, "At first I photographed in black and white. After a while, however, I began to see a dimension of meaning that demanded a color consciousness. Color photography was nothing new for me. Most of my commissioned work and all of my films have been done in color. But color in the Subway was different. I found that the strobe light reflecting off the steel surfaces of the defaced subway cars created a new understanding of color. I had seen photographs of deep-sea fish, thousands of fathoms below the ocean surface, glowing in total darkness once light had been applied. People in the subway, their flesh juxtaposed against the graffiti, the penetrating effect of the strobe light itself, and even the hollow darkness of the tunnels inspired an aesthetic that goes unnoticed by passengers who are trapped underground, hiding behind masks and closed off from each other. One could expound at length concerning all of Davidson's numerous accomplishments, his mastery of craft, his contributions to documentary photography in the 20th century. But as we have the man here himself, I think it's best that we bring him on as soon as possible. Before we do, however, I'll just mention a few things. I'd like to thank Gigi Casey, one of our staff in the art department, for making tonight possible. Gigi is friends with Mr. Davidson, and it was through her initiative that he is here tonight. I'd also like to thank Amina Makani, Mr. Davidson's studio manager, for her help. After Mr. Davidson speaks, we'll have time to answer a few of your questions, for which purposes we'll have a wireless microphone circulating. And then after the Q&A, Mr. Davidson will be able to sign some of your books, though he will only be signing copies of Subway. With that, I hope you'll join me in giving a very warm Strand welcome to a great American artist, Bruce Davidson.
Isn't this a fantastic place? I mean, this room is lined on the
Can't hear you, can't.
Bruce.
The microphone.
Oh yeah, the microphone. Yeah, isn't this a fantastic place?
Yeah.
All these books are unbelievable. I'm humbled to be in here and be included among all the information and ideas that permeate this room, this floor. I started photography when I was 10 years old. I couldn't get back into the basketball game in Oak Park, Illinois, so a friend of mine, Sammy, came by. He said, "Bruce, you want to see developing in my basement?" I said, "What's that?" He said, "Come on over." So I did. I followed him into this dark, dank, Midwestern home, and he flashed some light on something, and he put a piece of paper in an enamel tray, and an image came up. I didn't realize that was chemistry. I didn't realize that was photography. And I ran home, and my mother emptied out my grandmother's jelly closet, and I bought some developing equipment, and the rest is history. I'm still printing my own photographs, many of them, and I'm still waiting for the image to appear out of nothing. Except my parents would say, "Bruce, do you have to run the water all night long?" Okay, so I think with that, we'll look at some pictures. It's going to be a very short slide presentation or PowerPoint. I usually have 3 trays, but I have a book which has 630 images or so laying around here that you might want to look through. All my books up to now from 1960 England to Central Park to Subway have all been printed in Germany by Gerhard Steidl. Actually, Subway, which you're seeing now, it's the final printing of Subway. I re-edited it and added 20 pictures, looked through every one of the 350 slide boxes, chose Gerhard Steidl because the quality was just beyond anyone else's, and I've tried them all. Okay, so with that, further ado, let's see now, I guess I press this one's forward. I'll let you know a little later. Thank you. This voyage of self-discovery, I don't do it all by myself. I have an amazing wife who's also having a book of hers published that she'd been working on for 6 years. Amina, who's the brain, my brain, and does everything pretty much for me in terms of exhibitions and editing. And we have a little intern now, Marta, who's helping us. See, I'm pressing this, but nothing's happening. Oh. This one's foil? Okay. 1958, I teamed up with Jimmy Armstrong on a circus wharf and spent a number of weeks with him, traveling on with the circus and with him. I think I was drawn to Jimmy because he was half my size, and I'm half of most people's size. So we became close friends. In fact, when I had to leave the circus, I gave him a little miniature Rolleiflex camera. He's deceased now, but we had many years where we corresponded. The circus itself lured me, and so I began to photograph not only Jimmy, but the circus itself. I said to him, I managed, I was younger in those days, and I climbed up to the top of the tent to look down at the tiger. And then I realized that if I fell through the tent, it would be curtains. And later, in 1967, my wife and I were newly married. I had more or less finished East 100th Street, and I decided to join up with the Duffy Circus, and I took my wife on a honeymoon to a circus. I wouldn't do it again. Again, I got on top of the tent to photograph trapeze artists. Once I saw this trapeze artist with her mother, I understood the death wish she was having because she had no net. 1959, New York City was plagued with gangs. I read about a gang in the newspaper that had a rumble or a gang war, and I went to Brooklyn and looked them up and took pictures of the bandages and wounds, and then stayed for 11 months. I think I was 25 or 26 at the time, so I kind of blended in. was the leader of this group called the Jokers. And I wasn't sure I could get away with taking a picture of him when he was really angry. But I took a chance on it. Benji took this picture of me with a couple other gang members in Prospect Park. In 1959. Boy rolling up his sleeves, his name is Artie Giamarino. He's a retired New York City undercover policeman. And he came over to the house and he said to me, if you ever need any help, let me know. And my children got a big kick out of him because he had a .38 strapped to his ankle. Kathy died a number of years ago. In 1961, I was applying for a fellowship, the Guggenheim Fellowship Foundation, to photograph youth in America, an extension of what I was exposed to in Brooklyn Gang. But someone sent me down to Memphis, Montgomery, Alabama, to photograph the Freedom Rides. And so that really hooked me because I had not experienced such abuse and violence in my life at that time. So from 1961 to 1965, I photographed many demonstrations and marches, and not only that, but the mood and climate of the South, and in fact the North, at that period of time in our history. It's a blues club in south side of Chicago. A school in Selma, Alabama. Mrs. Blackman in Selma, Alabama, she had born 11 children. I think 10 survived. I went back to meet her, but years later, but she had died. But the little baby that she's holding was a 36-year-old insurance agent helping farmers in that area. And Mr. Harrelson, his two sons, his older son served in Desert Storm. And Mr. Harrelson walked on the Selma March. There were protest marches and demonstrations in Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama in 1964. This is during the Washington March and the famed mountain speech that King gave at that time. And Viola Aluza, she was a mother of 3 from Detroit, Michigan, that drove down to help college students meet curfews during the Selma March. The Klan got wind of it and shot her and killed her. As far as I know, this is the only photograph made of the blood-stained car. Mother Brown, I met her in 1962 in Harlem. She had been born a slave. She was 110 years old when I met her. An extension of my experiences during the Civil Rights Movement, I began to think that one city block in New York should be documented in some way. And so I set out to photograph this particular area of the city that was in need, and at the same time there were a citizens committee trying to change things in the community. And so I latched myself onto them and spent 2 years photographing. And here I used a large format 4x5 Linhof camera, and with this black focusing cloth and tripod, and I had to carry a heavy strobe with me, and a portfolio. And I just stood around. At this time, we were sending rockets to the moon, exploring outer space, and I felt the inner space of our inner cities was important to see each and every individual in their home, in their life. And I'm still in touch with some of the people who were helpful, who were there in the community as activists. Reverend Norman Eddy, Mildred Feliciano, and others. Then years went by and I decided to make films. I made 3 little films and wrote a screenplay, a full-length screenplay, based on the Isaac Bashevis Singer novel called Enemies: A Love Story. At any rate, I sort of left Hollywood and came back to New York and back to my roots. And while I was traveling on the subway itself gave me something. It kind of took me out of my depression. Hollywood faded away in the subway. And I worked first in black and white. This was 1979. Somehow the graffiti decoded itself when someone sat in front of it. And there was a moment when I shifted over to color. I wanted to shift to color because I felt there was as a dimension of meaning in the subway when you look at it from the point of view of color. And black and white was different than my color experience there. So I began again. I can only show you a few of these color images here. I worked with slow Kodachrome 64 film and a small strobe. I had 2 or 3 lenses and 2 camera bodies with me. I had a little wedding album, white wedding album, was trimmed with my work. Good people would say, if they said no, I said, well, could I show you my work? And they would look through my work, and very often they would say yes. But I was interested in transforming the subway from something that is negative to something that is positive. So I began to see life and art in the subway. And I could respond in the subway to whatever feelings I had, and I would just travel and traverse the subway without any agenda. I would like to get lost in the subway, look for parts of the subway I didn't know, times of days. Something about this chiffon scarf gave me a sense of something that is essential. I need to explain that while I was just about finished with my 11 or 12-month stint in the subway, New York Magazine called me and asked me if I would attach myself to a squad of police who are dressed in such a way and act in such a way as to get mugged. And since I'd already been mugged in the subway, I told the desk sergeant that I'm used to being mugged, and I wanted to be the decoy. So I would take my subway map out and pretend I was lost. And after about 7 or 8 nights, I finally got hit. I met this guy recently. I mean, he's 20 years old, 19 or 20 at this picture. I bumped into him. I met him accidentally about a year ago. He's a bodybuilder. And he said if I want to work with him, he'd be glad to work with me. And I think that's all I'm going to show you, but I'd like to have some questions.
Yes, I don't know if you can tell us this. I don't know if you can tell us this, but the photograph of the car that Viola Liuzzo was killed in, because I remember when that happened, can you tell us how you were able to get a photograph of that car?
Oh, that's a good question. First of all, I had to find the location.
Yeah.
I got up at 4:30 that morning.
She was still already?
Yeah, she was dead and she was removed from the car.
Right.
The police were guarding that car, you know, making sure no photographers took any pictures. But at 4:30 in the morning, I was able to sneak in, and I took a couple frames before police came with me with his gun drawn. I drove around. I sort of had an idea.
And you looked for a car?
I looked for a white Oldsmobile, and I didn't touch it. The windshield's blown out, the side's blown out, and you see the blood stain. You don't need color photographs to see blood stain. Yeah, that was, and I got out of there fast because the police would have arrested me.
How long before you published the photograph?
How long before I published? I published it as soon as I got back.
You mean out of the state?
No, yeah, as soon as the march was over. See, I photographed the entire Selma March, and I didn't have a motorcycle, so when I took a picture of someone, I'd have to run to catch up, you know. So I worked very simply, but then I got a call from from Saturday Evening Post. They asked if I would join forces with a reporter. So then I worked with them a little bit. They would tell me where to go, that kind of thing.
People don't remember that. Wasn't she a white woman who was shot because she was transporting?
Yes. She was shot because she was taking white and black college students back to the dormitory.
And she was white.
And she was white.
A white woman.
Yeah, and it's very complicated what transpired there. Yeah. But the Klan did kill her.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah. Yes, and this gentleman that says contacts, are you raising your hand for a question?
Who influenced your life?
Pardon?
The photographer. Who influenced your life?
As a photographer? A photographer? Well, Cartier-Bresson. More than any other photographer, Cartier-Bresson. I'll tell you why. Is that what your question was? Okay. When I was in college at Rochester Institute of Technology, before I went to Yale, we had 140 photography students and 2 women in the class. And they were beautiful. And they were sought after. And I managed to wangle a date with one of them at the women's dorm, which had a sign that said, both feet must be on the floor. I was willing to do that. And this young lady I was courting said, excuse me, I want to go to my room and get a copy of a photographic album where the photographer is someone who I really love. So I said, bring him on. And she brought down a huge book. It happened to be The Decisive Moment. And we sat there together looking at these pages of images, of photographs. And I said to myself, if I can take pictures like this guy, maybe she will see me in a different light. And so I went out and took some money that my parents gave me to invest and bought a used Leica. And then I went around Rochester mimicking what I thought were Cartier-Bresson's images. All I can tell you, it didn't work. But then I met Cartier-Bresson later when I went to Paris. And he became my mentor, no doubt about it.
Well, I'd like to mention that I was the next student to take a part at RIT.
Oh, you were in my class at RIT?
So that's behind you.
Oh, behind me. Okay, good. Didn't hurt you too much. Yes, gentlemen?
I just wanted to ask you, since you made the pictures in 1959, you've seen New York go through many different changes and different stages, and I was wondering how your work has evolved over time as the city has changed, and how you feel reflecting on the city now versus 40 years ago.
Well, I think one grows and life changes people. And the Brooklyn gang had more to do with who I was than it did with what they had. I was 24, I was angry, I was James Dean, you know? And I latched myself emotionally to this group of kids. It's what their emotionality is what's important about that picture. So it came from within me and attached myself to the way they were. You know, and my wife, my dear wife, has been working on a book for 6 years on the leader of that gang. He comes over to the house almost every Saturday. And his life has changed a lot since being a gang leader. So you're influenced by everything and everybody. You know, my friends are architects, designers, writers, you know, editors, that kind of thing. Yes. Young lady.
Thank you. I think you answered more or less the question. Now times have changed. Everybody can make a picture, the iPhone, the camera, digital, and there is no Lightroom anymore. So maybe this time you were not surprised so much for photography. But what are your advice for people that are studying, that really loves photography, to make the difference between all these pictures? And sorry I will take another question.
Okay.
How do you manage when you are 5 years making pictures about the same subject, like the subway place.
Uh-huh.
How do you manage to not be tired?
I didn't get that.
How do you manage not to be tired?
Tired?
To be tired.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Frozen.
So yeah. For so many years. Thank you.
Well, first of all, you have to understand one thing. Photography is my passion. I've been photographing since I was 10 years old. And in many ways, I'm still 10 years old. But what carries me on is the next thing that I'm doing. Like I'm working in Los Angeles right now. And I'm very interested in plant and animal life overlooking the city. It's very difficult to photograph that. But I'm doing it slowly because it's an expensive place to live. They don't have a subway yet in Los Angeles. So that challenge and that truth comes out of doing it every day. Sometimes I don't even know what I'm doing. In Los Angeles, I'm not quite sure what it's all about, but it's very interesting to me. So I think that students stop too soon. They should spend, if I were a student right now and I had a teacher like myself, I would say, you have to do a picture a day. You have to carry a camera every day, and you have to have by the end of the week, you should have 36 pictures exposed. And then someday you'll latch on to someone, maybe a street vendor. Oh, he or she is very interesting. I like this. I like to be with them. You see, so things open up visually, and that's what I would tell people. I don't get tired?
When
Oh.
it takes so long time to, not so long, so many, every day going to the subway, or how do you manage not to be
Frozen.
bored?
Frozen. You know, I don't care about all the iPhones. You know, I'm interested in quality. I'm interested in vision. I'm interested in challenges. I'm interested in humanity. You know, the more iPhones, the better, as far as I'm concerned. I don't care what they do with them. They're not really seeing anything or looking at anything. They're flipping it up. You know, it's like eating a box of peanuts. So, as long as they don't get in the way of my pictures, which can happen, has happened. Yes.
I think she's asking too, how do you sustain that passion when it's a long-term project, when you get toward the end of something and you've kind of plateaued? Where do you get that sense of there's more to be done, but you're already a little bit tired from what you've been doing? How do you find that sustaining energy?
I look at my children's pictures. They have houses, they have children. I'm a grandfather. I'm supporting them in some ways now. Yeah, I can't stop working. And nor do I want to. I still have a document in the book that's called Outside Inside. I made every print. I made over 2,000 prints in my secret darkroom in my apartment, and the landlord should ever not find it out. 2,000 print fiber archivally processed film in my darkroom. I have a ritual. I get up at 4:30. I have something sweet, Sara Lee cheesecake or something like that. And then I go in the darkroom, I turn on the opera. Maria Callas is my favorite because her voice is stronger than the water running sound. And I make prints until about 2 in the afternoon, and then I've had it. And then the prints are in the dryer. So I can't wait for that.
But in the middle of a project, if it's a multi-year project, you never reach a plateau during the project, or you want.
Well, I think in the LA things, they're good enough right now, but I want to go further. So I may need some research. For instance, I want to be the first person after a fire. and I've tried to do that. But it's very political, and you have to be with the fire department, and you have to be insured, and they won't let you in there if the fire's still raging. But just to organize that is something I'm doing. Now, for instance, one of the pictures, which you'll see in the book, my last entry in Outside Insight is my LA project. And one of the pictures is the back of the Hollywood sign. In all these years, no one has thought about photographing it from back, because then you get a sense of where it's in the desert. And one of it, I had to climb up a rope, a rappel on a rope to get up there. And I wasn't that bad, but my assistant carried the equipment. So it's still challenging. I'm still working on it. I'm still in the middle of it. Yeah, in the back. Yes, sir.
How do you go about creating a level of intimacy so spontaneously, like we see in the subway with strangers, and not step on their toes or
I see. And that's a good, very good question. It depends on the context. When I was working in the subway was deplorable. It was unsafe, and didn't run right, it was awful. People would say, what are you doing with your camera? I always had it out and open. Except sometimes at 2 in the morning I put it under my coat. It's because everybody was in the same boat. They wanted a book on the subway. Everybody was disgusted with the subway. So if you're doing a book on the subway, you must be okay. You know, it's like a parade. If you photograph people in a parade, it's okay because the festive is there. You see what I mean? Sometimes you need a festive. Or there's a picture in my Central Park book of a woman in a full-length mink coat with 2 little white dogs sitting on a park bench in the winter in Central Park. Now, the way I approached her was, those are really sweet dogs. What kind of dogs are those? And she said, oh, those are baboons. I said, oh, I would love to take a picture of your dog. Can I take a picture of your dogs? Sure. Could I take a picture of you with your dogs? Of course. But if I'd gone up to her right away and said, I'd like to photograph your dogs, she would be afraid. There's no intercourse there, social intercourse. So that's true. Now you can make a mistake. You know, I've made mistakes. But the best thing is to approach people humanly. See? So they don't feel you're sneaking, maybe, or you're some kind of a bad person. Yes, in the back. Yes, gentleman in the back.
I just had a question. You said being mugged all this time in the subway. Did that make you apprehensive about going back and shooting?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you very well. Maybe if you stood up, I could hear you better.
You said before you got mugged all those times.
Yeah, subway, yeah.
Yeah. Did that make you apprehensive about going back out and shooting more?
Oh, I had one camera left. And one Canon left. And also I reported to the police, and that was a nightmare. Because I had identified people. And sometimes you identify the picture and not the person. So I gave that up. You know, I figured they got it. You know, that's it. Nothing more I can do. But I did go back that day. I had to. Yes.
You've answered a number of questions, but in terms of changes in street photography, do you feel or do you perceive that people are more difficult to get closer to because of the digital technology that's available and everyone's photographing everybody? Do you feel a shift there? And if you do, how would you recommend responding to that to try and get the kind of images and intimacy that you were successful in getting?
I think people today are almost easier to approach. They know what a photograph is like, you know, and they want to be seen. You know, that's another thing. Some people would like to be seen. Oh, you look great today, you know. I don't know. I've always felt that street photography was really stealing a soul. Although I'm thinking that I'd like to try my hand at the street, you know, I want to be discreet. So what I would do is I would go to a flower shop and take pictures of the owner of the flower shop. Then I would say, do you know anybody else in the street that would be interesting to photograph? Oh yes, we just delivered some flowers to a 100-year-old woman. You know, so one thing leads to the other. So you're sort of like a reporter, you know? And that would work. You have to have an anchor, you see. But I'll let you know if I go back in the street what it's like. You know, I don't know what it's like. Yeah.
What made you decide to reprint Subway, and would you? What made you decide to reprint Subway, and how did you decide on the extra photographs? And would you ever reprint something like Brooklyn Gangs?
I didn't get the Brooklyn Gang.
Would you reprint something like Brooklyn Gangs?
Oh, yeah. Well, as far as Subway, see, Aperture, through Michael Hoffman was a visionary, he's deceased now, at Aperture. And he saw my Subway photographs. I showed him to him. But he wasn't prepared to publish it. He handed it off to a book publisher who turned out to be a crook. And also, that printing is not that great. In fact, I was there on the press in Italy, and a sheet came off, and the light on the Statue of Liberty was not there. So I said, the Statue of Liberty has a globe. It shines. Oh, we thought it was a speck. Of course, they've never been to America and they've never seen the Statue of Liberty. So they said, we fix it. And so they put on a white coat and they fixed it, but it's an artificial light. Okay. So that I said, someday I want to reprint this. So there was a wonderful publisher called St. Anne's Press, they're no longer in business. And they produced a very, very good book, but it wasn't the best. Gerhard Steidl, he is an artist, and he sees books as objects of art. So he said, I'd like to reprint it. You will go edit it again and look through and see what you missed. Because now you're a big boy, you'll see things that you didn't see when you were a kid. And that's true. You know, sometimes you're a little shy. That picture might not be a real picture. So now I have a final book, and it's never going to be printed again as good as that.
And Brooklyn Gangs, would you ever reprint that?
Yes, I would. And it's in the hopper.
It's in the works?
Yeah, it's in the hopper. And also my wife is writing a book on the gang.
Right.
Later. So that's going to come up due time. I figure the rest of my life I'm going to be spending in printing plants. Yes, hand going up, a young lady, or is it a gentleman? Yes. Someone's hand, I couldn't tell which one.
Hey Bruce, looking at your pictures of Central Park in LA, do you think they represent some kind of human emotion?
They do to me, you know. I've fallen in love with landscape. In fact, I started in Paris a few years before that, called The Nature of Paris. I was interested in photographing Paris from its point of view of its nature. Also its custodians. I've also did a project on the person that wipes off the tomb of the tomb. Anyway, but the nature without people, that sustained me. And then I thought, well, I'll do a similar thing, but in LA. You know. And now I've just finished editing Central Park. That's going to be the next book. Then expanded and reevaluated. Central Park's tricky because it's going to be very sentimental.
Yes.
Yes.
Bruce. In the subway photographs, what percentage of the photos would you say were stuff that you approached people, had a conversation, and you photographed them, as opposed to you just saw something and you just fired? Were there pictures you took just impulsively?
I can't understand what he's saying. My hearing is all
In the subway pictures, were there any shots? Yes. Were there any shots that you just saw something interesting and you fired, like without having the conversation or the personal connection?
Oh, yes.
So what percentage would you say, like?
Okay, so as I mentioned, I carry this little album of my work. I had three choices. If I see someone in a beautiful mood, I'll go up to them and I say, I'd like to take a picture of that mood. If they said yes, I said, would you mind going back into your mood? Everybody can do that, you know? Or if they said no, then I took out the, or I don't think so, I took out the album and they saw the work. Or I took it and ran like hell. So I had three choices in the subway. Yes, ma'am. And lady.
I wanted to know, I was looking at your book today, and the picture where there's somebody drawing a gun, what's the story behind that? Was that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Oh, in your book Subway, the picture where somebody's drawing a gun to someone else?
Yeah.
What's the story?
Okay, I think I mentioned it before, but I wasn't very clear about it. After I finished the subway project, I was about through, New York Magazine asked me if I would go out with a unit of police undercover who dressed in such a way and acted in such a way to be a purgatory. Okay, and so I volunteered to be bait. So I'm with the guy with the gun is a cop. The guy with this little stick and a chain, he was the thief. So, and I was the stool. You know, I was, I had my camera open and I'm looking at the subway map. I'm lost, I'm vulnerable, come mug me as soon as you can. Can't stand this any longer. And there's no truth in advertising. Yeah, a lot of people think that the policeman, Billy, that was his name, was a thief. No, he pretended to be a beat. He had his boombox, his dark glasses, his hat. So he dressed to make the perpetrator feel secure. Oh, we got a homeboy here. See what I mean? That was a psychology. If that understands. So Billy's the detective.
And Bruce, I just wanted to ask like a follow-up question. You spent like 11 months in the subway, and you spent I think about 2 years on East 100th Street. When you spend that like amount of time, like what is, like how long are your days? Like do you spend like 5 hours on the train? I mean, I know it must vary, but like how do you?
Well, I wasn't there every day, you know, but I was there different times of day and night. Like at 3 in the morning, then the subway's really dangerous. It's before the early nurses and come to work, and there's nobody in the subway except robbers, basically. So there's a picture in the book of a woman came in and she started to undress, and she put a lot of fruit and things on the floor, and I said to her, "Are you making a collage?" Yeah. I'm not very good at approaching women, but this time it was appropriate. And she didn't say anything. She lit a cigarette. Just then, the door between the cars opened up, and 3 young youths came in. And they looked at me with my camera, and they looked at her with the vomitous mess on the floor. And they said, she threw up all over the car, let's get out of here. And they ran away. So that was a protective bonfire, like you have in a jungle. And I rode to the end of the line with her, and I said, can I get some help for you? And she didn't say anything. So I went over to the policeman there at South Ferry, and he came over to her. You need any help, ma'am? And she said, pointing to me, this man has just raped me. Now I said to myself, you know, she's right. You know, I raped her with my camera, with my lens, with my photography, with my sensationalism of, maybe I shouldn't have taken a picture of her. You see? So there are a lot of complexities when you're talking about a body of work like that. There are things that happen to me, and things I've learned, you know.
One more?
Yeah. Oh, one more question, a good juicy question would be great. Yeah, yes, sir. You just.
Okay. I have a question about the Lower East. You said you use a large format and lean-off camera.
Yeah.
I mean, there must be a big difference to use a large format compared to 35 millimeter.
Oh yeah, but I'm in tune when I'm working with a large format camera and I'm working on landscapes without people. I remember East 100th Street was done almost all 4x5. I still have that very same camera. I still use that very same camera, although I have a new one too. No, my mindset is to the ground glass, to the format, to the quality of the imagery, technical quality. And also I like just standing there. I just like being there. You know, if I'm on a mountaintop, just being there is enough for me. So it's a different mindset than 35, you know? You're more internal. You're sensing in a different thing. So that's my mindset when I'm like that. With that mindset, I hope you find these books interesting. Thank you.